Hey, 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 welcome to my live stream here. Just checking to make sure the sound's all good. Looks like we're all set and rocking here. In the middle of the week, I'm doing a surprise bonus live stream to share some ideas and thoughts and data and information, education, talk about some stuff, that might be important to me and thee and ye and everybody. So let's see how this goes. I gave I'm folks arriving and rolling in here. I gave a talk, in fact, this last weekend here in Denver live at the Secular Hub. I did this presentation, and we did that as part of a fundraiser for the Hub. They are raising money so they can buy their permanent location here in Denver. Anyway, and I thought I just can't wait to get this out to everybody on my channel and hopefully share this around as appropriate. We have a lot of things to cover today, and I wanted to also, I'm never sure, and you guys will have to tell me in the feedback, the comments, whatever, let me know. I'm never sure during the week whether I should be live streaming. If I'm going to go live, should I do it around now in the afternoon when I can still reach folks over in Europe? This is a Euro-friendly time. Or should I be maybe I should be doing live during the week, weeknights at night, right, when more people are home from work or something. I'm really not sure. But anyway, you guys will let me know. Yes, I'm glad that you could catch this, Katie. So we are going to go over a bunch of stuff, and then I'm going to leave it open for some Q&A at the end if you have any questions for me, and if not, that's fine too. So I guess we should just go and get into this. Let's see now. Okay, so I want to flip over here. There we go. Let's make sure that yep, there we go. Good. So here we go. First off, I have a question. Is it okay if during this talk, and we're going to talk about manipulation a lot. So is it okay during this talk if I manipulate you? Well, just asking that question is itself manipulative, if you think about it a little bit. But I have another question for you, which is, how should I go about doing this talk today? I could start broad and then narrow in and go more specific, or should we maybe try to understand some of the more general concepts around coercion? Or should I maybe just go right into speaking about certain individuals who may be dominating our news cycles these days? Well, there's another joke for you, because I kind of set you up, because what we're going to do is we're going to do both. I'm going to start broad, and then maybe we're going to get a little bit more specific. Here's a couple of fun facts for you about the subject of manipulation, by the way. There is a factual thing. This is really true, that if I give you a choice of 2 or 3 different things, odds are you're going to choose the first option almost no matter what it is. There's a statistically greater chance that you're going to take the first thing that I offer in a series of choices. It's called the primacy effect. And it is quite interesting because it's a way of forcing a choice on you. And you, if you don't know this about manipulation and choices, you might fall for somebody pushing an option on you that they really want you to get only because they're giving it to you first. Another fun thing to know about persuasion and manipulation is that the more choices I give you, the less sure you're going to be of which you want to decide on. That's interesting. That feeling of power or joy that you experience when you have the freedom to decide to do or choose whatever you want, Well, that often fades into indecision and even frustration over not being able to decide. And I'm not just talking about anecdotes. In her book, The Art of Choosing, Professor Sheena Ingar describes a grocery store study where 2 different sampling stations were set up. One with 24 flavors of jam and the other with only 6 options. Now, you'd think with more options there'd be more sales, but the exact opposite is the case over and over again. In fact, there were 10 times more sales made from the smaller station with less choices. Yet I'm pretty sure most of you would have said that the larger station is what you want and that you appreciate the larger variety of choices so you can select exactly what you want every time. But that's not how we actually behave, see? And that's crucial to understanding how persuasion, influence, and manipulation work. It's not simple or obvious, and most of it is very counterintuitive. We like to tell ourselves that we're the masters of our fate and our free will drives every one of our decisions, but I think a lot of us know that that just isn't true. All right, now, before we carry on here, let me just check in and see how we are doing. Good, good, good. Let's carry on. So, first, let's talk about persuasion, influence, and manipulation. These are all synonyms, yet I'm sure that you can immediately understand that there can be big differences in how we think about these various forms of changing someone's mind. Cambridge Dictionary tells us that manipulation means controlling someone or something to your own advantage, often covertly, unfairly, or dishonestly. Now, the word goes back to Latin, manus, which means hand, which I think a lot of people know, but add to this the idea that you're using your hand to skillfully handle or manipulate or manage objects or people. Now, influence means to affect or change how someone or something develops, behaves, or thinks. And this word actually goes way back to the 14th century and was originally an astrological term that meant something streaming ethereal power from the stars when they were in certain positions, which acted upon the character and destiny of men. And that goes back to a Latin term for water flowing or streaming upon something. And that's where influence comes from. And then we have persuasion, which is a form of speech or writing that uses argument or emotion to make the listener or reader believe what the author is saying. Now, this word has meant pretty much the same thing going all the way back to the 14th century. And it comes directly from Latin terms that described strongly urging or convincing. Okay, so those are some of the different senses of this. Now, we can think of this as a spectrum rather than a black and white thing. You can be more or less persuasive, more or less influential. The spectrum of influence can be described by considering several factors ranging from ethicality and intent to the means used and the impact on the recipient. And you can see a little scale I put together here, just a little informal thing for us to take a look at. On the benign end of the spectrum, we have influence and persuasion being characterized by ethical motives. Kind of important. The persuader aims to achieve outcomes that are in the best interest or welfare of the persuadee, or at least are morally defensible. Now, examples of this could include a physician urging a patient to improve their health, or a friend advising a drunken buddy not to drive, or activists advocating for human rights. This is ethical manipulation. Now, when we look at a respect for autonomy, the influence attempt respects the persuadee's freedom to choose and to say no. I even tried that at the beginning of the video here, and I asked you if it was okay if I manipulate you. It is, it's consent, right? Consent driven. Individuals are made aware that they are being influenced. This is not something that's being done to them covertly or hypnotically or so subtly that they don't know what's happening. And that's a hallmark of benign or good influence. Another point here of that is cooperative communication. Here you can have communication can emphasize cooperation and dialogue, aiming for mutually satisfactory outcomes. And while it's not strictly persuasion in an adversarial sense, this kind of communication, well, it's light, it's not serious, it's not heavy, it's not overbearing, right? In fact, there's a focus on understanding. The goal may be to communicate beliefs or opinions or values or preferences without necessarily trying to dominate or devalue other people's perspectives. Even when you're aiming for change, it can be done with respect for the other person's dignity. Now, if we go a little bit further down the spectrum towards a more forceful or ethically ambiguous middle ground, we find that influence and persuasion bring some new things to the picture. There are intentional efforts to change attitudes or behaviors. The persuaders are consciously trying to employ strategies and tactics to bring about change, and this is often seen in advertising or political campaigns, for example. There are a mix of cooperative and potentially adversarial approaches. While it's not overtly abusive, the persuader may be focused on achieving their goal, and the interaction might end up having a kind of a win-lose dimension to it. There's also a strategic use of emotional appeals or message framing, where persuaders might highlight certain aspects of a situation to sway opinion, as seen again in advertising, where they make their products look and sound more appealing than they really are. Fast food, anyone, right? Then there are situations where dialogue and persuasion are complementary. And when the dialogue fails to resolve issues or injustices, more, shall we say, active efforts to change minds through persuasion may be deemed necessary, right? Where you start getting more action-based in terms of how you might go about trying to change a mind. And here I want to share, and I have 2 video clips to share with you today. These may get this video demonetized, I'm not sure. Let me just check in with you guys, see how we're doing here. Yeah, so let me throw up this first video clip. This is each of the clips I'll be showing today about 2.5 minutes long. So here's the first one, just to demonstrate sort of the middle ground, not abusive, not overbearing, not, completely unethical, but manipulation nevertheless that you may not appreciate. And I thought this clip encapsulated some of how we are manipulated constantly, almost daily. So here you go.
In my neighborhood, when you got in a fight, it wasn't whether or not you got knocked down, it's what you do when you get back up. I came here to tell you tonight that I will get back up. It's bullshit. We didn't have that saying in my neighborhood. It's just one of those phrases that it had some traction with the focus group, and so we kept using it, but it's not true. In 1998, I did a cover story for GQ. The title was Youngest Congressman Ever. And since then, every story has tried to explain how I got here so fast. And the word that people kept using was authentic. But here's the problem. This isn't even my tie. This tie was selected for me by a group of specialists in Tenafly, New Jersey, who chose it over 56 other ties we tested. In fact, our data suggests that I have to stick to either a tie that is red or a tie that is blue. A yellow tie made it look as if I was taking my situation lightly, and I may in fact pull my pants down again at any moment. A silver tie meant that I'd forgotten my roots. My shoes. You know, shiny shoes we associate with high-priced lawyers and bankers. If you want to get a working man's vote, you need to scuff up your shoes a little bit, but you can't scuff them up so much that you alienate the lawyers and the bankers, because you need them to pay for the specialist back in Tenafly. So what is the proper scuffing amount? Do you know we actually paid a consultant $7,300? Was it $7,300, Charlie? $7,300 for a consultant to tell us that this is the perfect amount of scuffing.
All right. So let's make sure that transitions smoothly here. Yeah, it looks like we're good. All right. So that was just, like I said, an example of the everyday sort of political and product advertising that we are assaulted with probably thousands of times a day, is crafted, like Matt Damon was talking about there, with thousands and thousands and hundreds and millions of dollars are spent every year trying to calculate the colors and the amount of scuff and that sort of thing. So I thought that was worth showing here. So let's carry on now to the last part here on the abusive or overwhelming end of the spectrum. Here we have sort of the red zone. We have influence and persuasion characterized by unethical motives. Here we might have the persuader use influence for purely selfish reasons, potentially with tragic or bad consequences for others. Manipulation, coercion, domination, exploitation. These are words that definitely have a heavier meaning than influence or persuasion. Examples could include unethical advertising that deceives, manipulative sales tactics, or leaders who use propaganda to control populations. There's also a disregard for autonomy and welfare. The persuadee's freedom to choose may be undermined through manipulation, pressure, or subtle coercion. The persuader may not respect others and may not look out for their welfare, especially if those others are more vulnerable. There's also adversarial and dominating modes of communication. Encounters may be viewed as competitive or win-lose, with the persuader trying to dominate the perspectives of the audience. And this, of course, devalues their lives and perspectives. The other aspect of this red zone influence is deception and trickery. Unscrupulous tactics, trickery, deceit may be employed to achieve goals. And this can include presenting straight up false information or creating misleading impressions. There's also with this an overwhelming or constant attempts at persuasion. They're just getting bombarded with messages and influence attempts, making it difficult to avoid the persuasion. And this also, of course, infringes on people's rights. Now, I have another video clip for you that goes a little bit deeper and a little bit harder to the size and scope of the influence and manipulation that occurs, again, on a fairly daily basis to all of us. This one from maybe somebody a little more nefarious than Matt Damon, and this is taken from Follow the House of Usher, which was a Mike Flanagan series. So here you go.
When life hands you lemons,
Make lemonade.
no. First, you roll out a multimedia campaign to convince people lemons are incredibly scarce, which only works if you stockpile lemons, control the supply, then a media blitz. Lemons are the only way to say I love you, the must-have accessory for engagements or anniversaries. Roses are out, lemons are in, billboards that say she won't have sex with you unless you've got lemons. You cut De Beers in on it, limited edition lemon bracelets, yellow diamonds called lemon drops. You get Apple to call their new operating system OS Lemon. Little accent over the O. You charge 40% more for organic lemons, 50% more for conflict-free lemons. You pack the capital with lemon lobbyists. You get a Kardashian to suck a lemon wedge in a leaked sex tape. Timothy Chalamet wears lemon shoes at Cannes. Get a hashtag campaign. Something isn't cool or tight or awesome. No, it's lemon. Did you see that movie? Did you go to that concert? It was effing lemon. Billie Eilish, OMG, hashtag lemon. You get Dr. Oz to recommend 4 lemons a day and a lemon suppository supplement to get rid of toxins, because there's nothing scarier than toxins. Then you patent the seeds. You write a line of genetic code that makes lemons look just a little more like tits, and you get a gene patent for the tit lemon DNA sequence. You cross-pollinate, you get those seeds circulating in the wild, and then you sue the farmers for copyright infringement when that genetic code shows up on their land. Sit back, rake in the millions, and then when you're done, and you've sold your lempire for a few $1 billion, then, and only then, you make some fucking lemonade.
Yeah, pretty lemon, huh? Now, as awful and truly deranged, and I acknowledge this, right? As awful and truly deranged as some of this manipulation can get, when we step way back and examine the full spectrum of this, we can see that persuasion itself doesn't really have any intrinsic or moral value. It can be considered a tool or a behavior or a social mechanism, but the very fact that people exist and want things from one another means we are always going to have methods of persuading and trying to change minds. The best defense against predators who use extreme or overwhelming manipulation techniques is to know yourself, know your own emotional triggers and weaknesses, and some of the different ways that your thoughts and your emotions can be twisted against you. Then know something about the various ways that manipulation can occur and try not to fall for it when it's happening to you. So now that we've covered some interesting general stuff, do you want to get more specific? Talk about something that may be concerning a lot of us right now? Maybe some of you are wondering, how could a broad percentage of our population become convinced that it's time for the country to have a meltdown and maybe even time to tear it all apart? Well, that's not just the product of some malicious social media campaign. That's not just some cult nonsense, although it could be argued that's part of it. And it's not just a basket of deplorables who are just going to die off and go away so that things can go back to normal. Because I think we want to be serious people today and talk about this in a serious way. I think we need to face the fact that our country has taken a turn and it's not going back. I believe it's important we understand the road we're on now, and in order to do that, we have to understand how we got here. So, as someone who has spent a decade now studying cultic influence and behavior, I want you all to know that no matter how popular you or somebody is as a person, or how skilled they may be as a cult leader, they are not going to convince people that they've never met to burn down their lives overnight. It takes time, and you might be surprised how long. Now, for all these years, I've been asking myself the question, why do people act the way they do? What drives people? And we all have easy answers or quick answers, and they aren't all wrong. Right away, most people jump to the magic trio: money, sex, power. But when times get worse or economically tougher or more anxious, maybe the answers become more modest. And it's just getting by, just trying to get along, just trying to not let things be too bad for me and mine, you know? Well, imagine my surprise after all these years to realize that economic concerns don't just drive voters, but they drive behavior. Caviar wishes and champagne dreams may be the stuff of reality TV, but when the rubber meets the road, most people are not chasing material wealth or an excessive lifestyle. But that doesn't mean money and resources and assets are not important. In fact, I'd argue they are among the most important things that we think about in our day-to-day lives. And that means economics is much more a study of human behavior than it is about exchange rates and currency valuations. When you're considering the behavior of large swaths of economically disadvantaged people, then of course their economics is going to factor into the equation. It factors into how we all behave. In other talks, I've discussed emotional manipulation in a lot of detail. Cults and con men like Tony Robbins or Andrew Tate, who I show here, make all their money basically doing just that. But we need to be real about social media influencers and our own power of choice. While undue influence plays a very important role in how predatory personalities work their magic and make their money, we must not invalidate our own agency or think we're just puppets in the hands of master manipulators, because we aren't. We are independent thinkers. And if we keep our wits about us, we can be good critical thinkers and avoid the more obvious nonsense that assaults us every day. But there are social levels of manipulation and control that affect all of us at a much deeper and much more meaningful level than individual emotional encounters with godmen or gurus. So we're going to go a little beyond individual psychology today, but we're still very much talking about influence and control. All right, just check in with y'all here. All right. So, economic manipulation may well be one of the most insidious and destructive forms of manipulation, especially today in our modern world. Let's be clear that it's not about dollars and cents you carry around with you, but digital currency and even cryptocurrency. The old ways are not the current ways, and this alone has been a source of incredible confusion for people of every generation, but especially the older ones. And to be fair, the incredible speed with which technology has changed and the ways we interact with it have been very, very hard to keep up with. Everyone feels some degree of technology fatigue, especially now with AI seemingly infused into everything. So when we're looking at this situation, keep in mind that we're only doing so to be aware of just how deep into our society and into our collective psyche some of this can go. So if we start with a simple question, we can actually dig pretty hard into this. Can a shrinking middle class facing significant economic pressures be persuaded through various efforts to vote against its own economic best interests? Well, the question is answered obviously with, of course they can. Over the past 5 decades, the American middle class has undeniably shrunk. Data from Pew Research Center shows a clear trend of fewer adults residing in middle-income households. And let me be clear before I continue that we are not going to be going into a lot of facts and figures or numbers and graphs, but I do need to paint a little bit of a picture here to get back to the manipulation aspect of this, which is what I really am talking about right now. This decline has occurred alongside stagnant wage growth for the middle class compared to higher income tiers. The center graph here shows how the top 1% have had their wages grow by 343%, while the rest of the country is plodded along with income levels that do not even keep up with inflation rates or cost of living increases. Many are experiencing a lack of economic security and a sense of diminishing opportunities. And this is the important part as far as what we're talking about today. This economic reality can breed frustration and anxiety, making individuals potentially more receptive to messages that resonate with their feelings of being left behind. The U.S. economy as a whole has undergone significant transformations over the past 40 years, moving away from a Fordist model characterized by large-scale manufacturing and employment towards a more fissured economy. This new model increasingly rewards intellectual property and financial rents, which can lead to a concentration of wealth at the top, and that's exactly what's happened. This fundamental shift and its implications for the middle class, such as job displacement due to automation and offshoring, may not be fully grasped by everyone, leading to a disconnect between understanding economic forces and voting decisions. People are only now beginning to question whether things like AI is coming to take their jobs, not realizing that the economic models that feed their families have already massively shifted without them seeing what was going on. In this climate of economic anxiety, political messaging often taps into cultural and social grievances. Issues related to identity, immigration, and perceived cultural shifts can become highly salient for voters. While there's a lot of criticism and controversy over the left's embrace of identity politics, that's only a part of this picture. On the political right, grievance politics is very much a front and center activity. Culture war issues and disagreements are one aspect of this, but the other is the way these issues can actually come to define how voters think about themselves. They're not just voting for a candidate or a piece of legislation they want passed. They get into a frame of mind of believing their vote is a kind of moral statement, and they are not citizen voters, but instead are a kind of foot soldier in a war for control of the moral landscape of America. And if we're being honest, that's a lot to be putting on any one voter's shoulders. But it also is a way to distract from those economic issues we were just talking about. Appeals to these non-economic concerns can be powerful enough to override economic self-interest at the ballot box for some voters. People may prioritize candidates who voice their cultural anxieties, even if those candidates' economic policies are not beneficial or are even detrimental to them. Drawing on Edward Bernays' work, we understand that propaganda involves the conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions. Political messaging, like advertising, often utilizes simplistic narratives and emotionally charged slogans. These narratives may not accurately reflect the complexities of economic policies, but they can still resonate with voters' feelings, leading to decisions based on emotion or superficial understanding rather than an actual deep grasp of the economic consequences of what's going on. The erosion of trust in traditional media can also lead individuals to rely on alternative information sources that may further simplify or distort economic realities. With the rise of social media and the attention economy, social media algorithms have conditioned people to consume information in shorter bursts, with less context, and in more, maybe we say reactionary or emotional ways than simply learning or analyzing events. This is acted in concert with the erosion of trust in traditional media to create a post-truth environment where facts are not only relative to someone's point of view, but the very concept of truth itself is questioned. This creates a very dangerous psychological situation of an almost constant uncertainty or instability about what is right and wrong, what is historically accurate, and does any of it even matter? The dangers of this are not confined to just one app or one platform, but have been embedded for the last 30 years in every aspect of our digital life. Where we are not being advertised to, we're being preached at, lied to, or manipulated to believe that some medication or mineral or some mediocre celebrity is the answer to all of our problems. This has had an incredibly detrimental effect on our collective sense of agency, security, and community. Principles of influence, such as commitment and consistency, can also play a role. Once a voter aligns with a particular candidate or viewpoint, there's a tendency to remain consistent with that commitment, even if new information suggests it might not be in their best economic interest. This also shows up as party loyalty, which runs very strong in many rural and certain metropolitan regions of this country. The appeal to authority is also relevant. Voters may place their trust in leaders who claim to have solutions, even without fully scrutinizing the details of those solutions, because they don't feel they can or they don't feel that they need to. And then there's the persistence of Reaganomics and the belief in trickle-down economics, despite evidence of increasing wealth inequality and limited trickle-down effects. And this illustrates how economic theories, even when they're debated, can influence voter behavior, even when the voters just don't have any real understanding of what's going on. And I believe that that has been the case for a very long time with some of this. For some within the shrinking middle class, social and cultural issues can take precedence over economic concerns when voting. Issues like abortion, gun rights, or concerns about cultural wokeness can be highly salient and drive voting decisions, even if a candidate's stance on these issues comes with economic policies that are not beneficial to the voter. These points, of course, are not partisan. There are people on both sides of the political aisle who align their ideological life almost exclusively to social and cultural issues. It's the combination of all of these social, political, and economic forces over time that have pushed whole sectors of our society into a non-democratic and fairly desperate perspective. It's not just a matter of some lies were told, people believed them and voted badly, and if they just have a wake-up call, everything could go back to how it was. I wish it were that simple, but if we're going to have any real hope of preserving our democracy, it's going to require that we be willing to look a little harder at what I'm talking about and how we got here. So, now that we've covered some broad stuff, let's wrap this up by taking everything we've covered so far and look at the MAGA base and what exactly was done to manipulate them. Much of this is pretty unethical and malicious. First, we have economic discontent and relative deprivation. Many Trump supporters, particularly in areas affected by deindustrialization, felt forgotten, ignored, disrespected. And there is not one human being anywhere who wants to be forgotten, ignored, or disrespected. These folks experienced economic stagnation and precarity, leading to anger that the American dream had vanished. Trump's promises to bring back manufacturing jobs through tariffs resonated with this group, and they prioritized his focus on their problems over concerns about his truthfulness. And this taps into a psychological phenomenon of relative deprivation, which is the feeling of being unfairly deprived of something that people believe they are entitled to. While the economic struggles of some Trump supporters are very real, the extent to which his policies would genuinely address these issues is debatable, if not obviously non-existent. It could definitely be argued Trump exploited this anxiety for his own political gain without really offering any substantive solutions. Next, we have cultural and social grievances. A segment of Trump's base, including some Southerners and evangelical Christians, felt that America was sliding backwards morally, drifting into moral chaos, really, or that their traditional values and way of life were under attack. Xenophobia and concerns about immigration also played a significant role, with some falsely believing in threats from foreigners. Trump amplified these resentments by defending Confederate symbols and using inflammatory language about immigrants and even the origins of COVID-19. And this, of course, aligns with what's called social dominance orientation, which is a preference for social hierarchy and prejudice against outgroups or others. Trump's repeated use of derogatory terms for immigrants and his amplification of fears about foreigners directly appealed to prejudiced sentiments and xenophobia. There's no question that that absolutely is part of this. Using such language to gain political support is widely considered pretty unethical because it dehumanizes and scapegoats entire swaths of our population. Now, there's also anti-establishment sentiment and rejection of the status quo. Many Trump voters, feeling left behind economically and culturally, lost patience with the political establishment and sought a populist leader who seemed to understand their frustrations. Even those who recognized Trump's flaws saw him as a MAGA bull in a china shop who would disrupt the status quo. And this is basically a rejection of the neoliberal consensus, as they say, and a desire for fundamental change in politics. And this can become so extreme that people will literally want and voice very, very loudly that they would rather burn the system down to the ground and salt the earth rather than continue in the misery they feel that they are in. We have seen that sentiment expressed in far too many corners of the United States these days. Now, we can also look here at this distrust of mainstream media and a belief in fake news. Some Trump supporters believed that the mainstream media was biased against him, and they even had a term for this. They called it Trump derangement syndrome. And that they were distorting his words as part of a deep state plot. And this fostered a reliance on alternative media sources, including the internet and certain cable news channels, which often reinforce their existing views, often with misinformation. Trump's constant attacks on the mainstream media and his promotion of fake news narratives undermined trust in credible sources of information. This created an environment where his supporters were more likely to believe wholly unsubstantiated claims and propaganda, potentially hindering their ability to make informed decisions. And this could be seen and should be seen as a form of manipulation. We then have obedience to authority and a cult of personality. Trump cultivated a strong sense of loyalty among his followers, with some viewing him as a unique leader who alone could fix it, and some even saw him as a savior figure. His demand for loyalty and the high scores of his most ardent followers on conscientiousness suggest a leader-follower dynamic of a cult of personality. And of course, I've said and described this cult many times. The encouragement of excessive devotion and denigration of any dissent, even within his own party, are characteristic of this cult of personality. Demanding unquestioning loyalty can also be seen as an abusive exercise of influence that discourages critical thinking. It's one of the biggest dangers about cults. And on this point of high conscientiousness and desire for order, research suggests that Trump's most loyal followers score high on this, which is a trait that's linked to a desire for discipline and adherence to obligations. Trump's promises to restore law and order may have appealed to this aspect of their personality. It's important to note that the perception of these influences as unethical, covert, or malicious can be subjective and is often viewed differently by Trump's supporters themselves. But based on the principles of ethical influence, like respect for autonomy or promoting welfare, and the potential for manipulation and exploitation that we've identified here today, I think it's kind of important and noteworthy that we can see that there is definite manipulation and influence being used against the MAGA base. And these are just, let me stress here now that these are just some of the factors that push and pull people's decision making. There are others. There's geography. There's what kind of opportunities exist in the zip code in which one lives. There's language. There's education. And who knows what else. But I brought up these points today to try to move beyond the simple stereotypes of what drives people to act or vote the way they do. What drives them to support authoritarians? Because if we're honest about history, we find that most authoritarians were voted in to screaming applause by the teeming millions. It's not rocket science to understand how this happens, but it is very hard to keep your head while it's going on. And I hope that some of what I've presented today might bring some clarity and understanding to what's going on, so maybe we can figure out how to overcome this and get along again. And on that note, that is the end of my presentation, and I'm going to flip back now to the chat screen there. There we are. Okay, so if you would like to ask me any questions about any of this, I'll hang out here for a few with you and we can do that live. And if not, then that's fine too. But let's see where we're at here. I hope that some of this was, yes. Okay, good. Just making sure we're all good. I'm gonna, one second. All right. Yes, most U.S. citizens have not realized that egg prices is not the problem. Yeah, that is true. The lemon story is from a show you can find, I believe, on Netflix called Follow the House of Usher. It's a limited series produced by Mike Flanagan. It's a horror series and based on the works of Edgar Allan Poe, brought into a modern context and played around a family of ushers. And that man, the character who was giving that monologue, was the head of the house of Usher, right? And so much tragedy befalls those folks, but he is a very rich, very powerful tycoon, very unethical man. Admittedly so, but early on in the show, it's no spoiler, and that is where I got that clip from. So there you go. Yeah, based on the works of Edgar Allan Poe. That's right. And I happen to absolutely love that show, by the way. I think that it demonstrated incredible writing and production. Anyway, it was great. It was a really, really great show. Fantastic moral theme running through the entire thing. And if you're familiar with Edgar Allan Poe, you would absolutely love the way that Flanagan brought all of the Poe tropes into this story and made them key elements of this whole narrative. Anyway, it's really good stuff. Yeah, exactly. In terms of how the talk went at the hub, it was very, very well received. People were very, very thankful about this. It was actually very surprising to me that some people responded as positively as they did, because they've not been connecting the dots between the big term economic picture and the small picture individuals that are suffering as a result of these big economic picture problems. I wanted to clarify these things for my audience and for the, anybody who can come and watch this stuff, because I don't see that people feel that they can understand the big picture of our economy and the forces at play on the big stage that the current administration in the U.S. is completely messing with in a very irresponsible and childish way. There's a lot going on right now, disrupting and taking apart things that our economy rests upon and relies upon, and it only is going to make all of us struggle that much harder because of these issues, and people don't put those dots together at all, at least not very readily. They are starting to become aware of the class war that has been going on, driving this economic disparity for a long time now. But we've got to speed up the process, I think, and that's why I'm talking about it today. And so far it's been pretty well received. So this is good. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Good stuff. All right. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up then. Yes, exactly. Let me wrap up by saying this in tune with what Margaret is commenting on here, because I could not agree with her last comment there harder. The time for us to be at each other's throats, it needs to come to an end. The time for us to consider our fellow Americans as enemies needs to come to an end. If we're going to get serious about saving our democracy, and we are talking about saving our democracy, then we've got to come to realize that we have, as I said the other day, have been a little asleep at the wheel as citizens. And all that means is we need to step up and fully honor our social contract, which means get involved in our democracy. Find out what's going on if you don't know, and get involved locally. You don't have to worry about things at the big federal scary level, because that's not where any one of us can do a whole lot. But we can take action in our community, and get involved with other people, because it's only through coordinated group activity that we can upend and I was going to say overthrow. I don't mean in any kind of violent way, but we need to get these idiots who have no understanding of what they are doing away from the governance of this nation. And if we cannot get ourselves organized in such a way as to do that, then we're going to have very, very, very drastic consequences for us and for our kids. No joke. And I'm not even trying to be a doom herald. It's just kind of when you see, milk spilled on the floor, you go, hey, there's milk spilled on the floor. You don't just keep walking around it and hope it takes care of itself. You have to take care of it. It just doesn't resolve by itself. And that's kind of where we're at now. And the only way we're going to accomplish that, as far as I'm concerned, is to work together. The enemy is not each other. You're not my enemy. I'm not yours. The people in charge, the people in the 1%, the people who do not care about us and are taking from us, are the enemy, and we need to deal with that. So cult influence and manipulation and control will always be part of what they are doing to us. We don't do that to each other anywhere near the way it's done to us by the 1%, the people who live in the rarefied air of our society, the top of our socioeconomic ladder. These are people who operate on a completely different set of moral values and priorities. And we are merely numbers and figures to them. We are not people. There's a lot of criticism and a lot of discussion we could do about the ways that we have structured things in our society, and whether it should be that way, whether it should continue to be that way. But on an immediate basis, I think we need to save our democracy. And I hope that some of the information I'm giving here can help bring more understanding to how, we got here, and maybe some suggestions on how we can move forward from that. Okay. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap up today. I think we've done all right. Thanks very much for coming around and watching. And if you're catching this on the replay, of course, please give me your feedback and thoughts about this. I very, very much want to know. I'm very, very curious about where you guys are coming from on all of this, and what else I might be able to do from my position as an expert in coercion and manipulation and cults to try to help explain or clarify or help directly people in navigating our troubled times. So thanks again for coming around, and I'll see you guys soon. All right. Bye-bye.